So, with iOS 26, Apple's been updating all their apps, unless you're GarageBand for some reason. But on your phone, there's an app you probably forgot about, because Apple pretty much did. And it's been neglected for a long time before iOS 26. The iTunes Store. It's probably been a minute since you paid any attention to it, but it's sitting on your phone right now, and I want to show you how sad of a state it's in. iTunes used to be a juggernaut. It lived on your computer and you could sync your music library to your iPods and other devices. Then in 2003, the iTunes Store was added. From your computer, you could digitally buy music and then put it on all your devices, which at the time was as easy as it got. Over time, iTunes would sell music, movies, TV shows, and eventually even ringtones and podcasts. If you'd gone out and bought the first iPhone in 2007, the iTunes Store wasn't on your phone. You were still expected to sync the content from your computer to your phone. Then with iOS 1.1, they added the iTunes Music Store, so you could buy the music and download it straight from your phone. Even the App Store wasn't added till iOS 2, so the iTunes Store app actually predates even the App Store. And over time, you'd get small updates, you'd get a new icon, and iTunes was the go-to place for people to buy their music. But notice I said buy. Things like Spotify and Pandora had been gaining popularity, where you don't download or own the music in most cases. But the beginning of the end for iTunes came in 2015, where Apple launched Apple Music. This was a competitor to Spotify using that same streaming model. And needless to say, it took off like that. iTunes didn't go away, it was still there for all your old purchases, and nothing stopped you from going and buying your music still on iTunes. The streaming age was here, and iTunes wasn't being updated to fit it. The next blow is in 2019 with macOS Catalina. To get to the iTunes Music Store, you now had to go into a generic music app, which was mostly there for Apple Music and local playback. And it's obvious nothing about iTunes was front and center for Apple anymore. They didn't want to develop it, and they took its functionality and split it into other apps. So now, 2025, that app is still on your phone, and it's really sad. First thing you'll notice is it doesn't even have the music icon anymore. It was swapped out for this star in iOS 11, I think. According to Apple, this is to represent the good value and quality of the stuff on the iTunes Store, but I think it's pretty obvious it's just to give the Apple Music icon the music note by itself to make no confusion. So as a quick aside, iOS 26 has a new menu system. Most apps have these tabs at the bottom like this with the search bar, and the liquid glass tabs are nice shiny eye candy that looks like this. So what's the experience like if we head into iTunes? Anemic. So let's break down what's on screen. Liquid glass? Nope, but that's not even the start of it. We have a UI that's using the design language from all the way back on iOS 7, a row of ads for Apple Music Radio, which is an Apple Music service, and then below that, another row of tabs just outright advertising Apple Music. So this much of your screen is advertising a service that's something else altogether, and what we do have is just horribly outdated. But we're still just getting started. On the bottom, we have tabs for music, movies, TV, and a couple more things in a more menu. So let's go to movies. Okay. We'll try TV shows, and yeah. This is what I'm talking about. This is why I think this is pathetic on Apple's part. So out of the 5 tabs we have on the bottom, 2 of them redirect you to an entirely different service altogether. So going back to our screen, this is how much of iTunes is actually useful to you. Now, the rest does work. You can view your purchases or even look at ringtones if you want, but so much of this app is using its space to take you out of the iTunes Store. And this isn't just Apple cross-advertising its services. If you head over to Apple Music and look at some content, there isn't the slightest whisper that you can buy this content also on iTunes, which is overall kind of a shame, because iTunes is not a bad service. It uses a different model, but you could have bought an album for, let's say, $10 about 15 years ago. And to this day, that album will sync and show up on all your Apple devices, always there, every time. But on Apple Music, if you were to stop paying, no matter how big your library is, it's gone, just like that. So hypothetically, any purchase you've made on iTunes for the last 22 years since the store launched, those purchases are still there, they're still honored, and you can still download them on any device you have, and Apple's been so good at upkeeping that, I have no reason to think they're not going to keep doing that into the future. But as the actual app sits, iTunes has been hung out to dry. Being orphaned of its own app on Mac, using its space to advertise other Apple services on your phone, and it only exists in its entirety on Windows because Apple doesn't feel like writing a new app for Windows. They just can't be bothered. The world and Apple's mostly left iTunes behind. Not necessarily for something better, but something easier. But one of the biggest content platforms ever has now been reduced to ad space and abandonware. And I wouldn't be surprised if sometime soon that the functionality that the iTunes Store does have gets merged into the music app sometime soon. Because as it sits, this is embarrassing. You should check out the ringtone store though, because some of them are just bizarre.
Hey, this is Donald Trump, and I've got an idea. Why not answer your phone?
So thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.